Well, Happy New Year and welcome home, everybody. You made it to church. You made it to 2021. Who's ready for a new year? Yes. And this weekend is kind of a big deal because it's the first time since last March 11th of last year that we are physically gathering on all of our Eastside campuses and Eastside online. So let's give a big welcome to our church family out in Bellflower, Redlands, Park Rapids online. And welcome home to our Anaheim family where we're broadcasting from this new outdoor venue, which is going to be a wild ride contending with wind and sirens and weather and planes overhead and trucks on the ground in the weeks and months ahead. But we can do this, right? We can do this. And my prayer today is that you just feel like you're home, whether you believe in Jesus or you're just curious, whether you've read the Bible or can't even spell the word Bible, or whether you've been around this church for a long time or this is your first time here, whether you're physically on an Eastside campus today or you're watching online in your sweatpants. Welcome home. And friends, as we begin this new year and this new adventure of regathering with new safety protocols and social distancing and all kinds of changes, I just want to ask you, let's stay positive, okay? Don't grumble like, well, that was okay, but I sure miss the way things used to be, you know. I think Philippians 2:14 ought to be our theme verse as we begin this new year. Look at it. Isn't that a great verse? Do everything without complaining or arguing. Let's all say it out loud together. Every campus, do everything without complaining or arguing. So if some member of your family or some friend starts complaining, I can't even find my child's kids' side room anymore, you're going to say what? Do everything without complaining or arguing, right? And if there are some technical glitches because some volunteers are, out of practice using audio systems and video systems in the weeks ahead, you're going to say, without complaining or arguing, yeah. And when you're asked to wear a face covering in order to show love to your neighbor, you're going to say, that was a little weak, to be honest with you. And if we have some weekends where we have to cancel our on-campus Anaheim services because of inclement weather or rain, you're going to say, you're catching on. Now, all of us know what it's like to leave home and to come back home. Maybe it was your first time that you went to summer camp, or you went away to college, or into the military, or you traveled all overseas. But it's always good to come home. In the words of Sam Hunt, I want to introduce you to my kinfolk, to my old friends, to the house in the pines where the road ends. And I want you to know this series is so much more significant than just inviting you back to church. Because what I want to do is I want to invite you to find your way back to God. Years ago, my wife Barbara's family had a big family reunion in Daytona Beach, Florida, and we stayed in this high-rise condo right on the beach, had a fantastic time. And every day I would head out to the beach with our kids to go body surfing, and the waves would start coming in, and we'd swim out and ride them and go back out and do it again and go back out and do it again. And we just had a great time. And after we'd been out there playing for an hour or so, I looked up to the beach to see where we were, and someone had moved our condo. I couldn't see it anywhere. And after looking further, I realized that it was about a half mile away. But I had no idea what had happened. What I didn't realize was there was this undertow in the water, and the undertow just slowly, just imperceptibly moved us further and further down the beach away from home. And that's often how we drift from God, just kind of slowly, imperceptibly. We find ourselves somewhere where we thought we would never end up. We don't mean to. We were just going to school, beginning college, dating someone new, advancing the career, raising the kids, pursuing our athletic passions. And then all of a sudden you look up and you say, I'm not sure where I am or how I got here. And there's a distance between you and God. 92% of us believe in God, but most of us feel distant and disconnected from God. We just drift. We go further and further down the beach. It's the student who's followed Jesus since they were a child, but then they head off to college and they're unprepared for what awaits them. Maybe there's a roommate who's a devout atheist, a professor who begins to belittle their faith in the Bible as just naive and simplistic. There are people talking about how many bad things Christianity has done in world history. And finally, mixed in with some of their own doubts, they find themselves just drifting from where they were with God. And maybe they're tempted to think that those who say they find their way back to God, they're just intellectual lightweights. They haven't thought it through. Maybe you've lost loved ones and you think God has forgotten about you. Maybe you've done some really bad things and you think God is disgusted with you. Maybe you're a child of divorce and you've never quite gotten over it. Maybe you grew up in church but never found a way to connect with the ritual, the formality, the going through the motions, never connected it to your life and soul. Maybe you were damaged by a church or a church leader along the way that hurt you. Maybe you were abused or neglected or hurt really badly in your life. Maybe you prayed to God for help and you don't feel like he came through. There are a million reasons we can get caught in the undertow that pulls us long ways down the beach away from God. I think one way or another, we all reflect Isaiah chapter 53, verse 6 that says, we all like sheep, all of us, have gone astray. And yet we all possess this inner longing to reconnect with the one who made us, to find our way back home to God, to be our best version of ourselves. But for that to happen, there has to be a spiritual awakening of some kind. Some of you say, I don't think that can happen for me. And others of you are like, I appreciate that you're talking about that, Gene, but I've already found God. Listen, I don't care who you are. An awakening is always needed. That's what I've come to conclude in my own life over many years, is that I need an awakening from time to time. I need a jolt. I need something that rings in my ear. Inside all of us, God hardwired us to have a longing that there's got to be something more. Have you ever felt that or said that? There's got to be something more. In fact, that's why I titled this message today, Searching for Something More. These longings that we have are so universal. They show up in the stories that we write, the art that we create, even the songs that we sing. In fact, just to prove my point, I'm going to sing a line from a few different songs that I'll bet you know. And then if you know the next line, I want you to sing it back to me from behind your mask, okay? Every campus, I sing the first line, you sing the next line. The Rolling Stones sing, you can't always get... Oh, what a hip church. Or how about you two? I still haven't found... Or how about Johnny Lee's old classic, Looking for Love? Please don't finish the rest of that song, okay? Or how about Mick Jagger, I can't get no, 'cause I try, and I try, I can't get no. All these classic pieces of art are proof that we have this universal longing in our spirit that says there's got to be something more. And so we start searching for something more. And this is really the story of all of our lives. And that longing that we have, that can be a good alarm to wake us up to something more, much more important that eventually leads us back home to God. And one of the ways that Jesus often helps us do this is by telling us a story. One of the best stories Jesus tells us in that regards is found in Luke chapter 15. It's the story about a man with two sons. And the younger son is saying to himself, like, this is it? There's gotta be more to life than this. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And he has this dissatisfaction, this sense of longing rising up inside of him. And he says, I gotta do something about this. And instead of turning toward home, instead of assuming that it could be found on the ranch with his father and his family, he chooses to set off to a distant country, because in our mind, it's always in the elusive beyond, isn't it? That we think we're gonna find what we're looking for. It's always out there somewhere. So off he goes. And maybe you see yourself in that story. Jesus begins the story Luke chapter 15, verse 11, he says, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. Now, this was a rather selfish, impetuous demand from a younger son, not even the older son. Now, you've got to remember, this is in the ancient Near Eastern culture where this is being told. And in that culture, honor was a really big deal. And the father possessed all the honor, and a son's job was to honor your father and your mother. And one of the ways you did that is you took care of them in their old age. And then you inherited the family farm, the family business after their death. And you tilled that ground that your father and his father before him and his father before him had worked so hard to pass on to you. Instead, this is one of the greatest insults. The son comes and he says, I want mine now. Which, as some authors have pointed out, is like saying the equivalent of saying, Dad, you might as well be dead to me. I wish you were dead. Because when you're dead, I get my inheritance. So he's basically saying, Dad, I don't care about you. I want my stuff now. I don't want this old farm. I don't like these old ways. I don't even like these people. I don't like this routine. I wish you were dead so I could have what is coming to me now. Can you imagine one of your kids saying this to you? Well, amazingly, the father does it. And before we just write off this son as being a big brash jerk and we bash him like that, can we just stop and be honest and admit that he's expressing out loud probably something all of us have felt? Life wasn't bringing him all he had hoped for. There's got to be something more. I can't get no satisfaction. Now, in this story, the son is expressing three longings that we all have. The first is a longing for purpose. Think back to when you were a kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old. What did you want to be when you grew up? People would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Was it a doctor, a lawyer, a firefighter, an astronaut, a professional athlete, a baseball player? Now, let me just ask you a question. Why in the world were you dreaming about having any kind of job or any kind of profession at 5 or 6 years old? You didn't need a job at that age, right? You didn't have any bills to pay. Why would you even think about what you wanted to be when you grew up? I'll tell you why. Because we all have this God-implanted longing to feel like we are on this planet for a purpose, for a reason, and that longing is put inside of us to draw us back home to God. The son chose to let those longings lead him in an unhealthy, a bad direction, which is what we often do. We take that longing and we allow it to lead us to drift off to a distant country. The longing for purpose is one of the loudest voices inside of us that can lead to a real awakening for us. There's a second longing we all have, and it's the longing for love. If there's a deeper desire that any of us have than to love and be loved, I don't know what it is. It certainly was the deep desire in this boy in this story. In verse 13, Jesus continues. He says, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. He goes off to Vegas or Hollywood or Amsterdam, some other exotic place, like Fargo or Barstow. He got as far away from home as he could. A distant country means that far off exotic place where we imagine the grass is always greener, right? Where we're going to have the good life. Wild living is a phrase in the Bible, like when it talks about that. It's kind of a combination of girls gone wild, spring break, New Year's Eve, Hollywood Strip, Vegas Strip, binge drinking, frat parties, all the sexual fantasies you can imagine. It's just drifting, 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 drifting. We learn from his older brother later in the story that he wasted all of his money on prostitutes. Why? Because we all have that deep desire, that longing for connection. Someone has said anyone who's ever knocked on the door of a house of prostitution is looking for God. Whether it's a house of prostitution or hooking up in a bar or making a love connection on Tinder or sex acts online, deep down, it's all looking for intimacy that can only be satisfied deeply by God. So there's this crazy turn of events. He drifts so far, he runs out of money, and famine hits the land. And this kid finds himself in such desperation that he does something a good kosher Jewish boy would never do. He goes to work on a pig farm. And he's living with pigs. He's shoveling their poop, and he is so broke and so hungry, he wants to eat what the pigs are eating. Now, I worked on a pig farm all through high school and college for 8 years. And let me tell you something, I was never once so hungry that I wanted to eat what the pigs were eating. I mean, that's hungry. And he's at rock bottom. And he's searching for this third longing, the longing for meaning. We long for purpose, we long for love, and we also long for meaning, answers to the big why questions of life. Not questions like, why is grandpa's hair gray and grandma's hair blue? Not, why is abbreviated such a long word? But why, God, if you are good, did you allow this to happen? Why coronavirus? Why this tragedy? Why this death? What's the point of life? Why am I in so much pain? Why do I feel so lonely? Why do I always feel like life is ripping me off? Why is all this happening? See, we long for meaning. I mean, think about this boy in the story. His longing for purpose sure wasn't being fulfilled how he thought it was going to be, as he thinks, is that all there is? His longing for love sure wasn't being met as he knocks on the doors of high-priced call girls he paid big money for. That was looking for love in all the wrong places. And it leads him to asking, why? Why is my life so screwed up? Why are things going so badly? How do I end up here? It's the hunger for meaning. No satisfaction. Can I tell you something? If suffering and pain is causing you to question God, even the notion that you have a sense of injustice about it, that this is not right, it's not fair, it shouldn't be this way, even that's an impulse implanted in your soul by God. That sense that there shouldn't be pain and hurt and breakups and job loss and frustration and divorce and difficulty and cancer and death and pandemics, all of those things are flashing red lights inside of you saying, this is not the way the world is supposed to be. And do you know what? God agrees with you. These are flashing red lights that lead you back to a God who turns out to be, he's a God of justice. He's a God of fairness, a God of love, a God of protection, who doesn't laugh at us from a distance and say, boy, that was a tough break for those guys down there. But we have a God who enters into our world, into our suffering, and comes among us as Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, the God who is with us, who himself suffers on a cross in pain, in real blood, so that he can put the world back together again. And your sense that this is not the way the world is supposed to be is exactly right. And God agrees with you. It's one more way God's voice is trying to awaken you to him. I found in my own life and in the lives of lots of people that this search, this longing that we all have for something more, serves as the greatest spiritual awakening for our lives. Often it's not until life gets a little hard that we're finally ready to awaken to the things of God. And you probably know what I'm talking about here, but isn't that true? It's the hard times, not the easy times. The empty times, not the full times. That God uses to draw us back to himself. That's Todd's story. Todd knew there had to be something more. And so he started searching. Take a look.
My name is Todd. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a rural part of Pennsylvania, where you're either a coal miner, or you come from a coal mining background, or you come from a dairy farming background. There really wasn't a lot of opportunity. My parents split up when I was 3 years old. Both parents battled drug and alcohol addictions for as long as I could remember. College wasn't an option for me. So when I was 17, I graduated high school. I needed to get out as soon as possible, right? In some way, some form, I needed to escape. So I joined the military. I would join the Air Force, and I served honorably in the Air Force for 10 years in various parts of the world. So from that time to, a year ago, I had this feeling of like wanting to give back more and wanting to do more for the world, but not being able to find it in the job that I was leading. I just felt empty, like there was a piece of me missing. And when I was telling this to a friend, my coworker, who invited me to Eastside, and she said, well, come, see what it's all about. And once I was here, what was missing, that disconnect, kind of like two magnets that are wanting to get together, they finally joined, they finally connected. I was like, yeah, something clicked. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I need to tap into. Throughout my life, I was searching and looking to things that kept leaving me thirsty. And coming to Eastside and finding that connection with God and building that relationship with Jesus, I'm not thirsty anymore. And I found purpose, not in what my purpose is for my life, but what God's purpose is for my life. And it's ultimately to serve him. And I wake up every morning asking God, how can I serve you today? And being connected with God and coming to Eastside and finding that connection, it gave me the blueprint for how I want to lead my life. And it's given me happiness, not from any external factors. I found purpose. And I was sitting in service, and Gene said, at the end of service, I'm gonna ask if anybody wants to be baptized to stand up, make that commitment spontaneously. A few of us stood up, and it was emotional to see those of us stand up and for the whole congregation to clap and applaud the decision that we made to do that. Having a relationship with God, being baptized, allows you to tap into that source of strength, of calm, of peace, and knowing that maybe God's not gonna prevent me from getting sick. God's not gonna prevent me from losing my job, but God's gonna be there to hold my hand and make sure that his promises are kept, that he's going to take care of you. God, our loving Father, is there to make sure that we are able to stand on our own 2 feet. And even though we may face hardships, we're gonna be able to stand strong in that harbor, no matter the winds that are blowing, the storm clouds that are showing up in our lives. We have God to rely on to give us that peace every night.
It's a great story, isn't it? I don't know about your story. I know your story is different than Todd's story. And yet I also know this, that all of our stories are really the same story, because deep down, we're all longing for purpose. We're all longing for meaning. We're all longing for love. And the important thing for you to know is you can never find that. You can never satisfy your longing for them in some distant land. They're only satisfied when you allow those things to help you find your way back home to God, who created you. So what do you do with that? What are you going to do about this as we enter 2021? Today, I want to humbly and boldly invite you to do one or a combination of 3 things as we begin a new year. First thing, it's real simple. I just want to invite you to be here every week for the next 3 weeks for this series. Invite someone to join you on campus or online. And if you've got kids, I'm telling you, your kids have the same longings that you do. And they need what our kids side and student ministries have to offer. This is a church for people who don't go to church, for people who don't even like church. And if there was ever a time, an experience for people who are far from God, this is it. So be here, invite your friends. And second, I want to boldly invite you to jump into our online 4-part Next Steps experience. Some of you are wondering, so it's a new year, I want to start things right. What's a good place to start a new year? This is it. This is your next step. You see, we believe God believes in you. We believe God has a 4-fold purpose for your life. And Jesus wants to help us find that. He wants to welcome us home. He is the one who provides us purpose for being here and a mission and an exciting reason to get out of bed every day. Jesus is the one who gives us unconditional love. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. Jesus is the one who can help us sort through the impossible questions of life to find meaning with a God that will never let you go. And so we've made Next Steps just convenient for you. You can do it from wherever you are, wherever you live, either on Sunday mornings or Tuesday evenings. Just check it out at eastside.com/nextsteps. And listen, I can make a promise to you that 2021 will be the best year of your life if it's the best year of your life spiritually. And there's no better place to help start to make that happen than at Next Steps. Now, third, I want to invite all of you to boldly pray a prayer every day for the next 21 days. And just say, God, if you are real, because some of you are wondering about this, make yourself real to me. Will you pray those words with me? And just every day say, God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. And as we continue to walk through the parable of the lost son throughout this series, I just dare you to pray that prayer with as much raw honesty as you can muster. And let's see what happens. God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. Let's just bow our heads together at every campus online. I'd like to ask our campus pastors to come and pray at each site. I'll lead us in prayer here. God, if you are there, and I believe you are, and this whole thing that we're doing today isn't a joke and you're real, I pray that you'll make yourself very real to us in the weeks ahead. Move among us and meet us and find us. Draw us close to you in this new year so that we won't have to search endlessly for meaning and purpose and love. And God, after going through a year like 2020, we are so ready for something new. Bring us an awakening so that we can find our true home in you. Use these weekend services, use the Next Step experiences. I pray many will jump in. Keep your hand on this series and make yourself real to us in the weeks ahead. Through the power of your son, Jesus, we ask these things in his name. And everybody said, amen, amen. Hey, before you head out, just two quick things. If you're new around here, we have a gift that we'd like to give you at Guest Central. There's a location on each side of the plaza. You'll find a great team there. And Next Steps. You could jump in tomorrow morning. There's a session at 9:45. You could jump in online. You could jump in Tuesday evening. Just go to eastside.com/nextsteps. All the information is there. What a great way that would be to start your year. And I'm so glad you were here tonight. I didn't know if anybody'd show up other than me. I haven't had like this is the first time I've been like at a normal weekend service since last March, and I was nervous, but I'm fired up, and I'm so glad to be doing this together. I love you, Eastside. We'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everybody.